Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wind Down Wednesdays. I'm your host, Paula Taylor, and this is episode 193. Every once in a while, an episode comes along that feels really especially important. That's kind of how I feel about today's topic. So, the title of today's show is You Are Not an Energetic Container. And this is like super fresh. Like, this came in this morning, not this idea of energetic container, but like kind of where we're going. And the activation that we're doing today is going to be super powerful. So if you're not a member of the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary yet, we would love to join. We would love for you to join us there. We would love to have you join us. These are powerful tools for shift that I share. And it's one of the reasons that I decided to gate this. And we use the word gatekeeping as though it's a bad thing. And also sometimes this is for your safety, because the work that I'm offering is increasingly potent and powerful, and being part of this community gives you access to some support around that. So we would love to have you join us there. There's always a link in the podcast notes. Okay, so I'm going to start with this. I know exactly when I posted this video on TikTok because I was recovering from my surgery. So it was sometime around the end of 2022. I posted a video and I called it You Are Not a Container. And it got almost no views because I forgot to hashtag it. And at that time, I didn't have nearly as many followers anyway. And so then I reposted it a couple years later. There's a thing on TikTok that's like on this day, and something will come in and they'll show me a video, and sometimes I'll share it back to my posts, or sometimes now I'll share it to my story, which is there for just 24 hours. And that's where the title of this episode came from, this idea that you're not an energetic container. And I'm just going to tell you how this came in. I was trying to decide if I should go more down that road or not, and my guts were like, nope, just stick with the topic. But that's where the title of this came from. And we're going to talk about what I mean by that when I kind of take you through this story. So we've been talking repeatedly about how 2025 is a year of reclaiming your personal power. And there's a lot of steps to that. And some of these steps happen and then they come back up, and we have to kind of excavate further. And I've been going back and listening to some of the shows starting around February. And a lot of these shows are like the ingredients of how to reclaim your personal power. And I've been thinking a lot about energy, as I always do as a professional energy worker, but I've been thinking about the way that I work with energy kind of in my personal field, and this idea of sort of separating my energy from other people's, not taking energy on, not kind of giving energy that's unwanted, not assuming I know what other people want from me energetically, which someone kind of recently called me out on in a very loving way, in a session I was receiving. And they also said something about enmeshment, this idea of kind of energies being sort of interwoven in a way that is not always healthy. That's what enmeshment kind of means. And I've been thinking a lot about this because our energies we're always kind of in each other's energetic fields. And I sometimes talk about this idea of quantum superposition and kind of disengaging. I've just been re-listening to the episode called Disengaging from Limiting Beliefs, super powerful episode. And again, these topics are sort of coming back around. And what's really interesting is after you've done some excavation and the topic comes back in, it's wow, I have a lot more insight on this, and I can kind of dig into this deeper, which sometimes is oh, I have to dig into this deeper. But then oftentimes yields these kind of epiphanies, which is what happened to me this morning. So I've been thinking a lot about how our energy moves, how our energy interacts with other people, what is so-called healthy, what is so-called unhealthy. Those aren't my favorite words, but what brings the most clarity, expansion, and harmony. And something that I've been noticing as a practitioner is just how intentional and cognizant I need to be of my energy, not just in a session, but as a session ends, after somebody leaves my space, whether that's a virtual space or a physical space. It's the same thing energetically. And what I've kind of been noticing is that I'm still picking up energy from other people. And I think that that is actually kind of a natural process. I don't think that there is a way to exist in this world physically and not have your energy interact with other people's energy to some extent, and not have a little bit of so-called enmeshment. Or, I mean, enmeshment implies that it's stuck. There's a key word there. Overlap, interaction is kind of a better word for that, I think. Like, the more I think on this, and this is sort of the nuance of the 3D to the 5D. The 3D is like all or nothing. You cannot be enmeshed with your clients. And then the 5D is sort of like, and there's a lot of nuance around that, because people contract to be in an energetic space with me, whether that's in the virtual quantum space or in the physical space. And they're sort of deferring to me as the expert in how to do that in a way that feels safe and supported for both of us. And I'm going to leave that there and come back to that, because I'm going to go into like this sort of aha moment I had this morning. I'm just kind of laying the groundwork. This is where my mind has been. This is what I've been thinking about. This is what I've been noticing, like in my body. How does my body feel? And how is that related to not just my energy, but like the energy I've been encountering? Because the energy of the collective is still so dense right now. We are moving into this expansion. If you're listening to me, you've set that intention, or you wouldn't be listening to me. And it's happening. And we're still living in the 3D reality of being sharing energetic space with people who are not in that intention of expansion, and oftentimes because of that are getting even more contracted, even more muddy, even more discoherent, even more unhealthy, for lack of a better term. Dense. I kind of like dense better. And so I've been thinking a lot about this and kind of like feeling this and like noticing it in my body, and kind of noticing, like when I finish a session, how I feel. How do I feel the next day? Is that related to like the session I did, or a place I went to, or people I've been in contact with? And I've just been noticing this from that kind of like neutral observer space that really is like our higher self, or like our source connection. Is like, oh, I was in this space doing this thing yesterday, and today I don't feel very good. Is that related? And if that's related, how is it related? And it's been really interesting to kind of explore this from a space of that kind of disengagement, of just noticing like, ooh, yeah, I kind of don't feel good. And I wonder if it's related to this. And also exploring this without any blame for the other person or the situation. I mean, in a practitioner space session, my mind went blank for a second there. Like, I am contracting to help someone with energy, and they are trusting me that I am going to help them separate out at the end, and I'm going to separate myself out because I'm the energetic expert in that situation. And so that doesn't mean that I'm not still a human who's interacting with energy, and like, how does that energy kind of work in my system? How does it work in the separation? Like, I've just been thinking about this kind of almost like mechanically. And I've had some things happen recently where I like noticed that I didn't feel good after a certain encounter, whether it was like in a space I was in, or with some people I was with, whether it was out in like mostly 3D space, which is always feels a little bit more dense to me now. I've been going to Canyon Ranch to help my sound healing mentor kind of load and unload bowls, and that's got a really beautiful expansive space. And I notice like I always feel good energetically the day after, sometimes not always physically because I've been moving the bowls around and stuff, but I've just been paying a lot of attention to that. And I've also been at the edge of another kind of flare of whatever my chronic conditions are. I talked in the one episode about having Epstein-Barr virus. I've got TMJD stuff. I like, to me, it's all just related to this. Like, it's like chronic. In Chinese medicine, it's called GU syndrome. I think it's GU, but it's pretty appropriate. It's like, it's just the stickiness that comes up sometimes when you're dealing with chronic things, fatigue, it's all of that stuff. And like over the weekend, I could feel my hands were like trying to flare up again with this dyshydrotic eczema. man, I'm having a hard time with words today. The energy's been really weird. And it was like, I was like, okay, I feel the fear around this. Like I was really working with this in that more of like an observer state. And it's like, well, I don't want this to happen. Is there a way, like, can I notice what's happening that's like precipitating this? Is it a physical thing? Is it an energetic thing? Is it an emotional thing? Yes, and it's probably all of the things. So I've just been kind of paying attention to this. And my body's been feeling not particularly fantastic. Like I had this kind of hand thing sort of threatening to come back in. I'm in the middle of a TMJD flare, which is ironic. I had an appointment with my TMJD dentist yesterday, and like I just happened to be in a flare when I saw her, which is actually probably helpful because she had some good tips for me. But I've just been kind of noticing, like, why is this happening? Like, why are things flaring up? And I woke up the other day and my traps were all tight, and it's just been an interesting space of just kind of noticing and disengaging from the like fear around that and the worry, and just kind of being like, oh, well, this is what it is. And like, how can I identify the root of this? And maybe I can move through this in a way that it doesn't have to become like a big thing that really slows me down. So I woke up this morning and my shoulders were killing me. Like the actual joints of my shoulders hurt, like inside the like ball socket of my humerus. I've got pretty good body awareness, so I can get like that specific sometimes. And so I was lying in bed. I didn't have to get up right away, and I was like, what is this? And why is this happening? And I don't understand. And like, I had the thought that I always have, like, am I doing something wrong, quote unquote wrong? And I kind of let go of that, and it was like I was looking at this sort of analytically and being like, okay, well, what can I do? And I did a little bit of meditation in bed, and that helped a little bit, but I was like, I need to do a sound practice. I haven't really done a full tones practice in a while, so I like to do that sometimes in the shower because I can kind of multitask. And so for me, a full tones practice is going through all 7 of the primordial chakra tones. I teach those in the dimensional frequency expansion classes in the first 3. So the intro class, you learn 2. In the amethyst, which is the second class, you learn 2. And then in the onyx class, you learn the last 3. So I go through all 7 of these primordial tones, and then I call in all 7 layers of dimensional frequency expansion. Interesting that it's 7 and 7. The dimensional frequency expansion is not specifically associated with the centers of the body. That's why these go together so well. Primordial tones kind of go through the chakras, and then the dimensional frequency expansion, angelic light language, the sounds, whether it's toning or it sounds more like speaking light language, they move through and beyond the body in a way that kind of really, it's a really great way to like clear the energy through the body and around the body. So I was going through my practice, and when I do the primordial tones practice at each chakra, when I finish, I usually just allow an affirmation to come in just spontaneously, whatever like feels good. And there were some really good ones coming in today. And I thought, oh, I should share these in the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary. And then because they're so spontaneous and they come through, I'm not sure I could even remember what they are because I'm really in the present moment. And then it kind of turned into a whole show. And originally I was going to do this as a bonus episode, and my guides were like, no, this is important. This needs to get out more publicly. So I went through the 7 primordial tones and kind of did a little affirmation of, I shouldn't say little, a powerful affirmation after each chakra. And then when I call in the dimensional frequency expansion light languages, I kind of just do all 7 in a row. Sometimes I do a little breath in between, but I don't necessarily stop in between each one and check in like I do with the primordial tones. And then at the very end, I was like, what ties this together? What's one big kind of affirmation that ties this together? And this is where like kind of my mind was sort of blown. And this is one of those things that like when I say it, it might be like, well, obviously it's like simple but not easy. And also like I had a full visceral understanding of this, which is always like that's the step of embodiment. And now, of course, I can't remember exactly the way it came in, but essentially it was like, you are not meant to hold energy. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was thinking about this because I've been thinking a lot about this idea of like, how does energy interact? And when I'm dealing with other people, how does this work? And first I started thinking about this idea of like, you are not a container. This is this thing that I was talking about a couple years ago, where I had been in a situation where somebody was upset or angry, and there's sometimes an understanding, depending on your nervous system default sympathetic response, is that you will take on someone else's energy. So if you have a fawn response, that's basically energetically your go-to response is like, I will be a container for your energy. And I'm being very simplistic about this on purpose, and there's like nuance to this that we could talk about for a long time, but just to be very like kind of simple about this, that's why people with a fight response often end up with people with a fawn response, because the fight response is to like push the energy outward. I'm not keeping this energy. I'm not this. I don't want this in my system. A lot of times it comes out as anger. And then the fawn person, in order to like keep themselves feeling safe, they're scared by the fight response, which is this kind of like in your face, I'm sort of shoving energy at you. The fawn response is to go like, oh, okay, I'll take it. Whatever you need to do to feel good, because I don't feel safe unless you feel safe. And then the flight response is to kind of just like hightail it out of there altogether. And then the freeze response is usually what happens like when you've been in this triggered state for so long that eventually you kind of end up in freeze, like you just kind of shut down. And so I was thinking about that. I was like, oh yeah, like I'm not meant to hold other people's energy. I'm not a container. I'm not an energetic container for other people's energy. Even as a practitioner, I'm not an energetic container for other people's energy. I'm not supposed to be taking people's energy on and holding it. And then this is the part that kind of blew my mind. I went a little further with my thinking, and I was like, well, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not meant to hold any energy, not just like not hold energy for other people, but the word holding implies stagnation. And if you go and look at my website on my services under the energy work part, it talks about how I'm going to help you with holding and stagnation in your field, because energy is meant to move. Here's the like mind-blowing aha moment I had. And like, again, yeah, energy is meant to move, like duh. And so many of us are holding energy that's not moving in our system, in our body, and in the space around our body. And so when you have a fawn response, like you are just sort of raised to hold the energy for other people. So you can't even really identify energy that you're holding for yourself, or at a certain point, it's like, you know, potato, like I'm holding energy, whether it came from outside of me or it came from within me, like I'm holding the energy. I'm a container for the energy's not moving. And guess what happens when energy doesn't move? We get sick. Again, super simple, not so easy to kind of like move out of, but like when energy's not moving, we get sick. Physically we get sick, mentally we get sick, emotionally we get sick, we get ill, we have disharmony, we have dis-ease when energy is not moving. And when you have been programmed to take other people's energy on and hold it, at a certain point, your body can no longer do that and be in a healthy space. This is why so many people who are energetic containers, who are functioning as energetic containers, have chronic illnesses. Full stop. As a woman, you're trained to hold energy. You're trained to be a container, especially for male energies. And I'm using woman and man energetically. This is like, has nothing to do with gender or sex. It has to do with like how you present and how you function in the world. And many times women have a fawn response, partly because that's what keeps us safe. Women and female presenting people, especially, it's safer to not be seen. It's safer to people please. It's safer to make yourself small. These are things that we talk about all the time. And another way to think about that energetically is like being an energetic container. Somebody around you is having big feelings, big energy, and they don't know how to deal with it. They're just as in dis-ease and disharmony as you are. They just maybe have a different response. And in America, especially, male presenting people are sort of programmed to be in a fight response. That's what like toxic masculinity and being macho is. I'm in a fight response. Just challenge me and see what I do. I'll come at you, bro. You know, it's that kind of energy. And so there's this like societal dynamic. And again, this is not always gender specific. I'm being very general here. This could be completely opposite gender wise. I'm just saying that culturally, this is kind of how we're programmed. And in individual relationships, a lot of times this tends to be the dynamic. And the interesting thing about this is that your safety depends on feeling comfortable, not necessarily safe, but comfortable. So if you're comfortable being an energetic container because you've been trained to be a container from an early age, then you feel safer when you're taking on other people's energy, when you're holding energy in a container that is your body. And so even when you start to work through that, and this is kind of where this comes up for what's happening with me, like I'm pretty good about having energetic boundaries at this point. No one's perfect, but I've gotten a lot better at it, and I do it professionally. So I have to constantly practice this in my professional life, and then in my personal life, I'm also getting better at this. And then sometimes they overlap, and then that can be even more confusing. But I'm pretty good at understanding how energy works and like noticing what's happening. And so I kind of have been noticing that I'm taking energy on, I'm holding energy. But let's put that completely aside. Let's say that all the energy I'm dealing with is just energy in my own system. It's circulating in my system or not, as the case may be. It's meant to be circulating in my system. So every time something happens to me where I feel unsafe, the body's response is to tighten up, is to tense up, tensing up your pelvic floor, tensing up your shoulders and neck. You know, in yoga, they say something all the time about like don't wear your shoulders as earrings, drop your shoulders. That is a tension response that is indicative of the body not feeling safe. When the body doesn't feel safe, it tenses up. And so regardless of what your pattern is in the sympathetic nervous system, fighting is, you have to have tension to fight too. So it doesn't matter what your default response is. We're sort of going around tensing up all the time because we don't feel safe often, many of us, because we've just not been trained to do that. We weren't co-regulated with as children from someone who knew how to regulate themselves. We're trying to learn how to regulate. And so even completely independent of anyone else, there's energy in our system. We have energy that was passed down through our mitochondrial DNA. We have energy that was passed down through our physical DNA lineage. Those things are connected, but I'm talking about physically and energetically. We have energy that has come in from past lives, which I call energetic lineage, and non-human origins, so quantum origins, starseed and angelic and elemental origins. That is kind of what karma is. It's like all of the energy that we came in already holding. So even if we never met another person, we came into this life independently and we're somehow like raised by robots or something, I mean, that would cause problems too. But let's just, right now, we're putting other people aside. We are holding energy in our body. We are treating our bodies as energetic containers, and that is not what they are. Our bodies are perpetual motion machines for energy. Energy is meant to be constantly moving within the body, in and out of the body, from up to down, from that like angelic source realm down into the earth, from the earth back up, out the top of the head in a torus field, in like a big donut. We have heart coherence that also looks kind of like a torus field, like a donut. Energy coming out of the heart, energy coming into the heart, energy coming out of the solar plexus. We are meant to be in perpetual motion energetically. And anytime we're not, we risk kind of stepping into some sort of dis-ease or disharmony. So I was thinking about, like, as I was toning, as I was thinking about like, why do my shoulders hurt and what's going on? And like, there's there's like these balls of energy in my humeral heads and the like ball of the bone that goes into your shoulder socket that's stuck. And I haven't figured out yet why it's stuck and where it came from. And that doesn't matter because I know how to do that. That's the work that I do. But I had this like aha moment of like, you are not an energetic container. You are not meant to hold energy. Energy is meant to move through you, within you, and in and out of your field constantly. We're constantly meant to be moving. And if you think about the three words I use for healing, clarity, expansion, and harmony, all of those imply some sort of movement. Because in order to have clarity, think about, we did a show a long time ago about like polishing your lighthouse windows, because your lighthouse windows get dirty. Like, you're a lighthouse and there's stuff blowing up against the windows of your lighthouse. And like, yep, they're going to get dirty. They're going to get dusty. That's part of being alive. It's part of interacting in the physical. So you're constantly sort of polishing, cleaning, bringing more clarity to your field. That is a form of movement. Expansion, that one's pretty obvious. But the interesting thing is that even when you're contracting, that's also a motion. When you breathe, your rib cage moves out, your diaphragm moves down when you breathe in. When you breathe out, your rib cage and belly comes back in, your diaphragm comes back up. That is a constant movement. Expansion and contraction. Just like overall, we keep talking about, like, we have these expansions, we have this contraction. That is meant to happen. The contraction is meant to happen. So if you're in a space of like spiritual bypassing or toxic positivity, and you're like, oh no, I only expand, I only expand, I only expand, and you're not allowing the contraction, guess what? You're stuck. You're a container. You're holding energy, even if you're trying to hold it in an expanded space, because it's meant to come back in so that it can go back out again, so that it can come back in. So expansion is movement. It's that kind of movement, like out and in, out and in. And then harmony is vibration, is movement. I mean, everything is vibration, everything is movement. And harmony is sort of like identifying the places where things are moving against each other and it doesn't feel good. So if I keep rubbing my hand over and over again with my finger, eventually I'm going to get like a burn on my hand, right? There's tension there. There's resistance in the skin. And that is discoherence or disharmony. So like, all I need to do is take my hand off and like, oh, that's more harmonious, but there's still movement in there. It's like, are my vibrations moving in a way? They're moving as waves. You can think of dropping a stone in a still pool of water and watching the ripples move out. That's how sound moves. So we're always having movement. And that is sort of, is the movement organized or not? Is it coherent? Is it moving in harmony? And even when it's not moving in harmony, it's still kind of moving. Or is it stuck? And is it vibrating? You know, like if I put my fingers together and I kind of move them back and forth, they're not actually moving, they're sort of stuck. So when we move from discoherence, which can be stuckness, or it's a movement that's not serving us, into harmony, that is like those big, beautiful waves of energy moving that goes along with expansion, that goes along with clarity. We are meant to be perpetual motion machines of energy. This is the mind-blowing thing I had this morning. And again, like, my conscious mind is kind of like, duh, like, what have you been doing your whole life? Like, you even says it on your website, I'm going to help you with stagnation and holding in your physical, energetic, and emotional bodies. But all of a sudden I had this understanding and this awareness that when I'm thinking about how I'm interacting with energy in the world, it doesn't matter so much what energy is coming into my system if it's just moving through and out. If I'm in constant motion, and sometimes people call this transmuting, and it's not our job to transmute energy for other people. That's not our job. And sometimes that's how it works, because there is no way to be fully disengaged from the energy of the world around you and other people. That's not what we're here for. If we were here to be disengaged with the energy of the physical 3D, we wouldn't be in 3D bodies. We wouldn't be physically here. So because you're here, that means you're meant to interact with energy. You're meant to interact physically with the people and things in the world. And there's no way to do that and not get dirty. You cannot move through life and not get dirty. And that's where the clarity comes in. You cannot expand all the time and not contract, because if you were, I can only breathe into a certain point and then I can't get any more breath in. And if I held my breath in for too long, I would die just as much as if my breath was out and held. It has to be in constant motion. So expansion and contraction. And then within that, I'm always looking for movement that feels harmonious. And the interesting thing is, this is constantly changing too, because what felt harmonious to me 5 years ago or 2 weeks ago may not feel harmonious to me now. I walked into my treatment room last Tuesday and the energy felt really off to me. It felt really dense. It felt really heavy. And I was like, what is different here? And what was different was me. I had changed so much that the energy in that space no longer felt clear, expanded, and harmonious. And I needed to reset my intention and kind of move the energy in that space. There was maybe some holding in the space. And again, this sounds like so simple, and yet it's not an easy thing to understand, because we receive a lot of messaging, especially in the spiritual world, about, again, like, I need, and like, yes, you do absolutely need boundaries. I was going to say, I need to have boundaries and I need people to not cross my boundaries. And like, yes, that is important. And also they're going to get crossed. It just happens. Life is not perfect. We are never going to live in a perfect lab experiment where everyone around you does exactly what you want. It's just never going to happen. And so, like, yes, I've placed a boundary and maybe the boundary's been violated in some way. And then I have to decide what to do about that. Do I freeze up and hold on to that? Or do I just like let it flow through? And then, in the 3D, I might have to say something to someone. I might have to reinforce that. I might have to renegotiate the boundary in some way. I might decide to disengage. Sometimes disengaging is the way to go. But it's interesting when this person said something to me about enmeshment with my clients. Like, I've really been thinking about that, and this idea of like, there's no way to fully avoid that. I mean, if you're defining enmeshment as stuckness, then that's what you're looking to avoid. But there's no way for me to completely be in a space with someone in a session and not have our energies interact. There's no way to do that. And so my focus can be more on what it usually is when I'm separating, which is like allowing the energy to move. So someone's come in, they had some holding and stagnation. That's probably reflected in my system. So we're both releasing some holding and stagnation. It's my job to help them understand how to let that go, and then to help that process continue by letting them go as they go out the door and kind of calling my energy back to myself. And the whole thing is like this really beautiful but fairly elaborate dance. It makes me I'm thinking of like Bollywood and how they move their hands so specifically, and the mudras actually mean something. That's a complicated way to dance. That's kind of what we're doing. It's like we're always in this sort of negotiation, and other people may have different intentions and they may not be as aware of their energy, which is really common, especially right now. And then it's like, how do I choose to engage with this? And maybe the answer is I choose not to. I'm not going to engage in this particular relationship or this particular setting. But I also think that for some people, that's kind of a default, is to like, that's the flight response, right? Oh, I don't like this, I'm just not going to deal with it. That's just as discoherent as doing the fawn or doing the fight, like constantly disengaging. There's a difference between like being in that expanded observer self where you are connected to your higher self and your source energy. That's a state of flow. That's why when you're in a true state of flow, like things just seem to work out for you. And when you are resisting, we talk about resistance a lot too. Resistance is just saying, I don't want to flow. I don't want to flow. I don't want to flow in this particular direction. I don't want to flow at all. I don't want to do this. I don't like this. This doesn't feel safe to me. That's why when we resist, like what you resist persists. I always think of that statement. But when we're resisting, things feel like they're not going as well because we're not moving energy. We're meant to move energy. If you look at something like Qigong or Tai Chi, like the whole thing is like, how is your energy moving? How are we always moving with our energy? And then there's the intention. Are we moving energy in a way that serves the highest and most illuminated good? That's really important because there's people who are moving energy with ill intentions. Absolutely, they might still be moving the energy, but they're moving it in a way that's not serving the highest and most illuminated good. Am I moving in a way that allows me to feel safe? And that's the big thing that kind of came in today that I noticed. We're going to get into this in our activation today a little bit, of this idea of like letting our body understand that it's safe to move. It's safe to have the energy move. And our biological response is for the energy to stop moving. I see this a lot when I'm working with people who've had like an injury or maybe a surgery where somebody like cut into the body or like something happened, and in the body everything rushes to that, like when you twist your ankle, it gets all swollen because all the like blood is rushing there and your body's trying to like help, and it's doing all of the things that it does. It's moving a lot of stuff. But what happens energetically is that your energy tends to stop or pull back. So I will work on somebody who, let's say, had like a wound on their leg, and the energy is not flowing down the leg anymore because it's not quite sure what to do around that wound. It's like unsure. It's that like tension response of like, oh, I'm not sure what to do. And a lot of times our energy's not moving down our legs all that well to begin with. So then when you add injury on top of that, like the energy's really stuck way up higher in the body, somewhere out of the head. It's not even in the body. So this is a completely different paradigm for me, even though, again, like as I'm saying it, it all sounds like really obvious. It just came in a way where I'm like, not only am I not a container for other people's energy, I'm not meant to be a container for my own energy, because contain implies stuckness. I'm going to contain this bird in a cage, and she can only move so much. There's stagnation and holding implied in that. Whereas if I allow her to move freely, then she gets to do what she needs to do with her body. And that is what is meant to happen with us. And there's a lot of cultural programming here that teaches you it's not safe to move physically. And physical movement is one of the ways that we move energy. It's one of the reasons it's so important. And I was thinking about this, and I had a band director in junior high, and he was very strict and also very funny and like very beloved. But like when I look back, like almost anything else in like the 80s and 90s, you look back and you're like, oh, I'm not sure that was like the healthiest thing. And so he would yell at us if somebody was tapping their foot, because you're trying to like learn to play together in an ensemble with rhythm, right? And like you're meant to internalize that rhythm. Wow, talking about this is making my throat tight. That's funny. So you're meant to internalize the rhythm. And one of the ways that we sort of start out by doing that is sometimes like actually tapping the foot along to the beat. And as you go like in a professional, like pay attention if you ever see a professional band or orchestra, like they're moving, they're flowing, their upper bodies are flowing, but their lower bodies are usually not moving at all. And this was essentially shamed out of us. So if you were tapping your foot, he would actually throw this foam brick at you. It looked just like a real brick. The first time he did it, like, everybody freaked out. And also nobody wants to be singled out. I mean, these are like 5th to 8th graders. So like nobody wants to be singled out for doing something wrong. And so you're shamed out of tapping your foot. And then I thought even further back to like elementary school, where it's like, all right, we're going to sit at a desk for almost 8 hours a day, and maybe we have recess or gym, but like essentially, excuse me, essentially they want you to sit in one place without really moving all day. We're not meant to do that. And then we grow up and we have jobs where we're sitting in one place and not really moving. And so no wonder like our shoulders and neck get tight, because we're like sitting at a computer and we're not really moving. Like we're meant to move in a pattern of flow. And of course, sometimes we're going to be static, we're going to be not moving. And then in between, we need to make sure that we reintroduce the movement so that we don't get stuck in patterns. And that's all like massage therapy is like finding the stuck patterns in people's body and trying to help them kind of like not necessarily reverse those, because sometimes they're compensatory and it happens. Like they're like the story in school was like somebody was working with a professional pitcher. Like if you release all the muscles in that guy's arm, he's not going to be able to pitch the same way he does. But you can support the movement in that repetitive motion. You can support movement like within and around the tissue, even if like the muscle itself has to hold some tension. And that's a perfect example of like all of the nuance in this, which is why this is kind of mind-boggling to me, is like everything is about motion, and a lot of the things we do in our life are inviting us to be a container, to hold energy in a space that's not moving, whether it's in the physical body, whether it's in the emotional. You know, sometimes I'm in the store and I see a little kid melting down and I'm always like, oh man, I wish I could do that sometimes. Don't you wish, you know, you could just start screaming in the middle of a public place? But like as an adult, you can't do that because it's not polite. And I get it. Like, you know, if everybody went around screaming, it would be, especially for someone like me who has sensitive hearing, like that would be a lot. And we also don't like have outlets to let that energy out in a healthy and safe way sometimes, so it gets stuck in our body. And then we're like, geez, why does my body hurt? Why is my jaw so tense? Why do I have rashes breaking out on my body? It's like the energy trying to move. It's the energy trying to be released. It's the energy trying to be exchanged. And we have so much judgment about the quality of energy, and that's partly where that like transmutation idea comes in, is that sometimes we're going to encounter energy that doesn't feel good to us. And yes, we can do our best to disengage or kind of superposition ourselves like out of that. And also sometimes it's going to get in. And so then it becomes a process of transmutation of like, this is energy that doesn't feel clear, expanded, and harmonious to me. I'm going to move it through and out of my system and call in clarity, expansion, and harmony. And if you're cognizant and intentional and loving about this, you're also going to release that energy in a way that feels loving. So you've transformed this sort of denser, muddier frequency through your body in clarity, and then out in whatever way it comes out with more clarity, expansion, and harmony. And we're not required to do that all the time. And sometimes that's the only option we have in a space that we're in. So we need to know how to do that. And it all revolves around movement. It all revolves around not being a container. I'm not a container for someone else's emotions. Even if someone's angry at me, it's not my job to take that emotion and energy on and hold it in my body. It might be coming into my system, and if I'm functioning in a clear, expanded, and harmonious way, it's getting ground down and out. I had siren confirmation right as I said that. And I'm coming back into a state of regulation. And we're constantly going in and out of dysregulation and regulation. Dysregulation is a part of growth. It's when we get stuck in dysregulation. Even if you got stuck in regulation, like again, it's like being stuck in an expanded space. You can't expand further without the contraction. So we want to be in regulation most of the time if we can. And also, like the show that I did last week, I talked about being dysregulated. I was dysregulated when I started that and throughout, because it was a very vulnerable topic and I felt kind of uncomfortable talking about it. And also because I was allowing it to move by talking, because talking moves energy, and kind of processing it, by the end of the episode, I was like, oh yeah, I'm back in regulation. It's about resilience. It's about movement. It's about allowing for flow, is another way to say that. So you're not a container for energy, yours or anyone else's. You're a perpetual motion machine. You're a dancer. You're water. You're flowing, whatever visualization works for you. And when energy flows, that is when the dis-ease or the disharmony can release. And then we can come back to what we call health. And especially when it's chronic, it's a process of relearning and learning how to regulate and learning how to be in flow, because it might not have been safe. That's the fawn response is similar to freeze. If I don't move, the predator won't see me. We have these bunnies in our front yard, and when the dogs come out the front, they don't move. And a lot of times the dogs don't actually see them because they have pretty good camouflage. And when they can't do that anymore and they take flight, that's when the dogs try to go after them. So there is a biological sort of wired in response here that makes complete sense about the freeze and the fawn and the fight and the what did I miss? Freeze, fawn, flight, and fight. These are biologically wired nervous system responses. And we are not just biological beings, we are beings of energy. And we can allow the energetic movement and the understanding of how our body works to bring flow through these states. So they're like, yep, I was in a little bit of a freeze and it's okay. And I'm going to just allow myself to move out of that. And whatever got stuck in my shoulders when I was in that freeze, I'm going to go in and I'm going to let that move. And then the pain might go away. The discomfort might go away. It will. It might not right away. And that's where sometimes people get discouraged. It's going to take time. If you've been developing a pattern for 40 something years, it's not going to go away in a day, generally. It can, but generally it's going to be a process of relearning how to flow. It's like retraining, damming a river so that it will flow in a different direction. It's a process. So if you would like access to the increasingly potent, powerful meditations and activations that accompany each of these full episodes, as well as the bonus episodes of the podcast and many other perks, exclusive discounts, interaction with like-hearted beings, we would love to have you in the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary. Right now, it's still $11 a month. That may be changing. You can try it. If you don't like it, there's no obligation to stay. We always wish you well if you choose to leave. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have a beautiful rest of your day or evening. I will see you on the next episode of Wind Down Wednesdays.